Chinese President Hu Jintao has landed at Andrews Air Force Base in Washington. We're just waiting for him to leave his plane there, and he is going to be met then by Vice President Joe Biden. Now, tonight, President Hu gets a private dinner with President Obama and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and you can bet economic relations will be on the agenda for that as well. For more on those economic issues, Encima Global President David Malpass joins us. He's worked with a number of White Houses as well as was the chief economist for Bear Stearns. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's talk first about, I got your newsletter last week, and I thought it's very interesting, the linkage between China's inflation, which a lot of people think they're going to have a problem with, and they're doing a lot to fight, and the Fed's easy money policy. How strong is that link? You know, how guilty should Ben Bernanke feel about Hu Jintao's problems?
Hi to you both. I think there is a connection. So as the Fed creates too much money or a loose monetary policy, the dollar weakens and commodity prices go up. China feels it because their CPI basket is more heavily weighted toward food prices, toward commodities that you import. And so it makes them very worried. Here
we see, by the way, President Hu on the screen there shaking hands with Vice President Joe Biden.
How much, David, in your view, of this is pomp and circumstance? How much does really get done this go round?
Oftentimes, I would say pomp and circumstance, but the U.S.-China relationship is critical, and these conversations are where they actually talk about the business that they want to get done. So this is not a normal state visit. These are countries that used to be, separated.
And he, from what I understand, is arriving with various Chinese executives. We know he's going to meet with various high-level U.S. executives, Jeff Immelt of General Electric among them. So it is a lot about business, isn't it?
That's right. And as the relationship grows, they actually talk about ways to resolve their differences. You know, with a lot of the world, say when you're dealing with Russia, you're skeptical that that's really what they want to do. And so the meetings aren't as productive. This is an actual business meeting where the two countries discuss their future.
You know, so much of what you hear in this country about China is that they have an unfair advantage because of their cheap labor and their cheaper currency, and that's why they're sort of winning the trade war with us right now. And we always say, hey, it'd be in their best interest to let the yuan appreciate by 20% or so. Why don't they listen? Is that really a clear picture? Is that really a true picture, you think, if you look at it from a bird's eye view?
The U.S. likes to blame others. We've got a high unemployment rate, I think largely of our own making. And so China is sitting there saying, look, what we're doing is changing as fast as we can. And so we've created factories on a given exchange rate. Our whole economy is built on the idea of having stable money. And so you should listen to us. That's their point of view. The U.S. is saying, no, it's not working for us. So I think both will express their points of view. I don't expect much change out of this meeting on the exchange rate.
And can we be critical? I mean, it seems like Chinese officials are certainly critical of the policy that's been taken by the Federal Reserve and the impact it's having on them. At the same time, we're sometimes somewhat critical of Chinese officials continuing to raise reserves and raise rates kind of rather quickly. Are we right to do so, or it's each nation kind of taking care of their own business?
I think there's a lot of self-interest. So China is looking out for itself. And they say the U.S. manipulates the interest rate. How did we come up with a 0% interest rate? That's not really a workable policy for the world.
Right. That's
what works for us. And so I can see both sides of this, and I don't think they'll resolve it today.
Let me ask you about the importance of Chinese Treasury ownership. I mean, they own a lot of U.S. Treasuries, and a lot of people make a big deal out of it. There was a great Saturday Night Live skit about it. Does it really give them that much of an advantage in the power dynamic?
I don't think it does. China's been pretty clear that they don't feel that it does. For one, they don't own other things in the U.S., so their entire holdings is in treasuries, and so they're underweight on equities, underweight on bonds. And what's been going up? Not U.S. Treasuries, it's the other stuff. They're taking low returns in order to participate in the U.S. economy.
Right.
So I think that part of the relationship works better for the U.S. than for China.
David, hang on for a second. We just want to bring in our Peter Cook. He's our chief Washington correspondent. He's in Washington. So, Peter, you know, we've been talking with David about what we expect to get out of this meeting. We'd love for you to kind of weigh in on this as well.
Well, we've been sort of warned ahead of time that there aren't going to be a lot of deliverables. We're not going to see major announcements, any major break in relations between these two countries, major advances in relations. But simply the fact that we have the Chinese leader here at this particular moment in time when these two economies are so important, here for a state visit, the first official state visit since 1979, that in and of itself is significant, not only to the Chinese, but also to the U.S. officials. They will talk about substantive matters. They will talk about economic issues, some of the thorny geopolitical issues like North Korea that continue to fester, if you will. But I think David's right. We're not going to see a major change on currency issues as a result of this. But we may see more progress on the business front, specifically market access issues for U.S. companies looking to do business in China. And also, and you all have highlighted it already, the significant number of U.S. companies talking to the Chinese while they're here about the possibility as well of Chinese investment in the United States. That's perhaps the newest wrinkle in this conversation that could result from this meeting.
All right, Peter, thank you so much. Our Peter Cook there in Washington.
I wanted to ask your take because obviously you focus on a lot of other things. You introduced Fed Bank of Dallas President Richard Fisher at the Harvard Club last week. Art Laffer was on the program earlier. He wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal last week saying it's time to reduce federal spending and that would be a boon to growth in the U.S., a boost to GDP. And, of course, this all comes up because of the debate on what to do with the debt ceiling. It has to be raised. I think everyone agrees. What's your solution to the whole story here?
I think cutting spending, if Washington could do that, would be very good for growth and jobs in the U.S. The Keynesian concept that if the federal government borrows money and spews it around, it's going to create growth doesn't really work when you're at this level of debt that we're at. So if they could find a way to slow the growth of spending,
but you think they should raise the debt ceiling? I mean, 14.3 trillion is not enough,
right? Because technically they could go into default.
That's right. People are talking about this idea that they could sequence it so they didn't default. I don't think they're looking at the numbers sharply enough, and I think that would backfire on the Republicans because it would look like you were willing to risk default. Instead, I think the Republicans should take the lead, say we are responsible, we want to cut spending, we're going to pass the debt limit with spending cuts attached.
I mean, shouldn't all politicians take the lead here, whether it's Republicans or Democrats alike at this point? I mean, to me, everybody kind of got us into this mess. This deficit didn't just happen overnight. It's been years in coming.
Exactly right. And so I think the Republicans could go back to the Democrats and say, look, Mr. President, are you proposing just to keep borrowing? Where are your spending cuts? And they need to see that. I'm afraid the State of the Union that President Obama will come out with on January 25th won't have much in the way of specifics. It's still unclear whether he actually wants to reduce the size of government.
David, it's so funny because whenever Matt and I discuss this, we get emails of people saying, well, tell me specifically where so-and-so wants to cut things. Where do you make the cuts here? Because everything seems to be like a political hot button here.
That's right. You can undo a lot of the wasteful spending that was put in place last year and the year before. You can begin to undo the TARP spending.
Meaning what specifically? Say undo the spending that's been done.
Well, look, the federal government is spending $3.8 trillion. And so if you make a list, it's a list that's 100 pages long of spending that needs to be cut now. That's the huge subsidies that are going to ethanol, for example. They're spending giant amounts of money in an environmentally bad way in order to help a couple of big corporations produce ethanol. It's a broader program than that because it's popular in Iowa, remember, which is the presidential state.
Which they can't really touch, right? Especially if they're campaigning there.
We just saw this disaster in December where they extended the Bush tax cuts, which I think was good, but then did everything else that both parties wanted to do. There wasn't a single cut. And so there's no shortage of cut ideas from the ag programs that are basically business subsidies, from I think unemployment insurance that we have to see an end to that at some point.
Yeah, we've got to run. Forgive us, David. Always, we love getting some time with you. Thank you so much. Sure.